Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Matt Reynolds, editor of Packaging World Magazine, and I'm here with Paul Jenkins, managing director of the PackHub. We have a few questions that are basically questions that Paul and I get every time we do one of these types of presentations. And the first one is, it's the G word, and that's greenwashing. So the question asks, do you think greenwashing in the packaging industry is on the rise? And Paul, I'll open up to you first.
It certainly feels that way. You've just got to go on LinkedIn and see lots of examples of challenges and counter challenges from various different packaging executions. With the increase in sustainable packaging, inevitably there will be an increase in the amount of potential greenwashing that is going on. And one of the challenges is that sustainability isn't an exact science. It's all about getting the right packaging for the right application. So, and it's about understanding, doing things properly in terms of life cycle analysis and really doing the research to justify the changes. And what I've been really encouraged with over the last 18 months or so, as I think I mentioned earlier, is the amount of supporting data we're now seeing with packaging changes. 3 or 4 years ago, people would do a new paper pack and say, paper packaging better than plastic, without really supporting, giving consumers a reason why it has changed. So certainly greenwashing is seems to be on the increase, but I think that's partly because there's just so much going on now. And as I said, it's not an exact science, and you can claim and counterclaim on various different things. But it's certainly a challenge, and it's certainly something that needs to be kept a very close eye on.
Yeah, and there's some level of accountability. There are a couple of governing bodies out there that just spring to mind. I don't know if governing bodies is the wrong word, but I would say watchdog groups like As You Sow is one of them that is currently ranking bigger brands for what they're how well they're living up to their 2025 goals. So it's a matter of accountability, and it sounds like you're right, Paul. As long as there's a rationale and there's a reason for moving, let's say, from plastic to aluminum or plastic to paperboard, and it's not done in the somewhat cynical point of view of because we'll sell more units this way, but rather there is a real sustainability or eco-minded underpinning to that action, then some of it is just, intentionality. The intention is good, and the result can be demonstrated to be good based on at least one line of thinking. So yes, we're seeing more examples of what could be potentially perceived as greenwashing, but Paul, it's just because the space is flooded with sustainability now, and it's hard to, pick one from the next. So moving along, we always get the questions in every presentation that Paul or I do. What's the most sustainable or most sustainable material to be in? And the answer is there is no answer. It's entirely up to it's up to your application. Are you in liquid? Are you in liquid that's fairly viscous? Are you in liquid that's carbonated? Are you, is it something that's shelf stable for 5 years or shelf stable for a week? All of that calculus happens with I can't even imagine the number of variables that exist. You mentioned life cycle analysis. That's really important, but there is no one single, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, there's no one single algorithm out there that accounts for every single variable in consumer packaged goods and packaging that to optimize for that specific package, the most sustainable method of packaging. And then getting back to the greenwashing point, we work with actually on our advisory board, David Smith, is on our editorial advisory board at Packaging World. He told a story as in his consulting work, he had a brand come to him, and the brand, I believe, was some sort of meat or fish that was in a tin can. We call it tin cans, really steel cans. And this person came to this consultant saying, this is my legacy packaging. How do I become more sustainable and be perceived as more sustainable for my consumer? The answer was he couldn't have been. That was about as optimized as he could have been for his application, because steel is recyclable. He could throw that into, it's a consumer adoption of recyclability for that format. People know to recycle that, even in the US. So, sometimes the answer isn't always, distant. Sometimes it could be on your doorstep. But the bigger picture is, there is no silver bullet at this point. It's just a matter of the application and finding the best materials for your application. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, when I totally agree with what you're saying, is it depends on what you're trying to achieve as well. So if your strategy is to reduce carbon footprint at all costs, then you will go down a certain route. If it is a plastic reduction strategy, you'll go down a different route. So the point you make about there's no one right answer, often depends on what you're actually trying to achieve in the first place.
Good. Yeah, that's a good addition. I was thinking about the material in the bottle, but it's also what the stated goal of the brand is, and a lot of that goes to their sustainability goals that again wrap into that 2025 deadline that you've mentioned a few times. And one last question that we get from time to time, I would say increasingly lately, is how does advanced or chemical recycling fit into the conversation? And advanced or chemical recycling would be methodologies. There's very different methods right now. A popular one is not popular, but a common one would be combustion or heating any and all waste, not just plastic waste, not just glass waste or paper waste. Heating any and all of these waste into their smallest material. I guess it would be the molecular level, down to the smallest molecular level. For plastic, and it would be a polymer to the smallest polymer, to then be able to rebuild that material to whatever you want it to be. And it does seem like it has the trappings of a silver bullet in the future. It could be an answer. There's, like I said, it's not just a combustion model. There's cold versions of this, high pressure versions of advanced or chemical recycling that really could take any and all waste and create a situation where you're molecularly rebuilding that into whatever you want it to be. PET, PE, PP, all coming from the same stream. Problem is, we don't have the infrastructure for that now. We don't have the volume capability to do that. So it's going to be a long-term thing. It's going to be a governmental, and it's going to be something that all of the United States, all of the world is going to have to be on board. And that might be distant. That might not be available tomorrow or next year or 5 years from now even. I know there's a lot of good companies that are working on it right now, but in the meantime, there's no reason to stop your sustainability efforts thinking that there might be a silver bullet down the road in the future. Paul, anything to add on that? Or?
No, again, an excellent answer to the question. I just think, chemical recycling, we are tracking it as part of our innovation zone packaging platform. So there are examples that we're seeing. But this webinar is called Sustainable Packaging Today. So that's about really utilizing the infrastructure and the systems that we've currently got in place to move forward now, today. So the chemical recycling will require a step change in processes, which may or may not come down the line. So you can't rely on that potential silver bullet, as you said. At some point, it may not happen. So in terms of recycling, the opportunities are already out there and ready to be exploited.
Good. And that puts a bow on everything. That brings us to the conclusion of the webinar, all the time that we have. Naturally, if you'd like to learn anything more about what we've discussed or like to discuss more with us, visit the websites that you see on your screen right now. Use the email addresses to contact Paul or I. And then we hope you found the topic informative. And we really invite, is there more that we should be covering? Are we missing anything? Is there something that we should be covering in either of our publications or outlets that we aren't? We want to know. Let us know. Contact us, and we hope you found everything today informative. That's all the time that we have for today. Sustainability Today.